Hello. Today I'd like to share a very ancient poem with you. This is from the first ever poetry album in China, which is called Shi Jing. Shi is poetry, and Jing means classics. The poems in this book were all written by unnamed authors. They were really writings or folk songs across China that were collected by officers in the king's court to assist the kings to understand how everything was in the vast regions of China, and then later passed on. These poems were dated roughly between 1100 BC and 600 BC, roughly from the beginning of the Zhou dynasty to the spring and autumn period. If we take a look at this slide, you'll see that this is really ancient. This 5 to 600 years during which time poems in this book were written. In the West, it was roughly from a couple of centuries earlier than Homer, all the way to Pythagoras in ancient Greece. People believe there were as many as at least 3,000 poems, but unfortunately, the vast majority have been long lost. It was Confucius himself that picked, verified, and compiled these poems and turned them into an album as we know it now. Since then, this poem has become one of the must-learn classics, with the same status as the Confucius Analects. There were 305 poems in total, so this album is also called Shi Sanbai, 300 poems, or simply Shi poems. The album covered a wide range of subjects in everyone's life and was succinctly and beautifully written. But as you would appreciate, because it was written so long ago, some of the language was very difficult for us modern people to understand. Some characters have long fallen out of use, for example. So when you need to publish it, as in books, either in physical form or electronically, you have to make it up on the spot. Now, I have randomly picked a page from this album, and you can see there are quite a few difficult characters which need to be notated with pronunciation, like this and this and this and these. Remember, this is for native Chinese people to read, and there are still so many notations. And some characters, such as this and this, these three, the font is different, as you can see, because these characters were not in the standard dictionary, and the publisher had to improvise it when needed. Just imagine, when poets in the Tang dynasty, Li Bai and Du Fu, when they read poems from Shi Jing, those poems were about 1500 years old. It would be as if we are looking at poems of Li Bai and Du Fu. So part of the reason we don't read them as much is because they are indeed very hard, much harder than the Tang poetry. And their form is also very different. We know from the 30 or so poems that we have learned, most of the ancient Chinese poems have 5 to 7 characters in a single line. But in Shi Jing, by far, the majority of lines have only 4 characters, as you can see here, all the way. This is quite interesting, as it shows that the poetry first evolved into a 4-character format, possibly because rhythmically it's the simplest and most natural. It's a bit like in music. The earliest and most common form is in the beat of 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The other important feature is that these ancient poems were more like songs to be sung. We said before that in Chinese, poetry is called 诗歌. Shi is poem and the ge is song. So historically, these two forms were evolving together, and the distinction between them were really very vague. Many Tang poetry were set to tunes and sung by professionals, such as Liang Zhou Ci or Wei Cheng Qu, for example. And we need to remember that in the ancient days, the poems in this Shi Jing were pretty much all sung by the folks. Therefore, their form was much closer to what you would expect from a song. They have a main opening part, and then a chorus-like part, which gets to be sung over and over again, with no or little variations, such as here. This is the chorus part. Anyway, now we are ready to take a look at the poem we are learning today. This is the very first poem in this Shi Jing album. The subject is about a young man expressing how much he wanted to be with a beautiful girl that he was in love with. Now, considering the Valentine's Day was only 3 days ago, I think this is also a very fitting theme here. The title is 关雎. 雎is a kind of a bird living in the water. 关is a very vague onomatopoeia. So 关关 was described as the sound of this water bird. Let's read the poem together first. This is much longer than what we used to do, but much of it is just repetition, and hopefully you could get the rhythmic beauty and find its song-like quality by reading it this way. 关雎，关关雎鸠，在河之洲。窈窕淑女，君子好逑。参差荇菜，左右流之。窈窕淑女，寤寐求之。求之不得，寤寐思服。悠哉悠哉，辗转反侧。参差荇菜，左右采之。窈窕淑女，琴瑟友之。参差荇菜，左右芼之。窈窕淑女，钟鼓乐之。We have just explained what 关关雎鸠 means. Basically, it's this 雎鸠 water bird, chirping, sounding like 关关. 在 is at, and 河 is river. 之 is the same as the. Basically, it's an indication of possessive quality. 洲 is a small and flat island in the water. It's like this. So this line is saying, this 关雎 bird is chirping in a small island in the river. This, in fact, has nothing to do with the subject of the poem, but just a random opening. The Chinese people believe that there is a subtle connection at a deep level between certain natural scenes and certain subjects, or certain mood intended. And in poetry, they often link them together. They often start with a natural scene and follow with the main subject, as here, the main subject is 窈窕淑女，君子好逑. 窈窕 means beautiful, graceful, and kind, often referring to girls. 淑 means nice and elegant, again referring to girls. 女 is girl. 君子, we know this already. It means some decent and virtuous man. 好 means good, and 求 means match. So 好逑 means a good match. So this line is saying, this graceful and beautiful girl is a virtuous man's good match. These 4 lines, 16 characters, is really special. They are effectively the very beginning of the Chinese poetry. It's succinct, but at the same time feels very rich in its content. You've seen, this is quite a long poem, and most people won't manage to memorize the whole of it, but they can usually remember these first 4 lines. So I would encourage you to do so too. These 4 lines are almost a symbol of the ancient Chinese poetry collectively. One thing to point out is that even these 4 lines are very popular, there is often misunderstanding and confusion of its meaning. In particular, this 好. Some people tend to read it as 好, so that to treat it as a verb, meaning to be interested in. And this 求, they tend to interpret it as this 求, meaning to seek. So the meaning of these 2 lines become, this beautiful and graceful girl is what the virtuous man is interested in seeking. It may sound okay, but it's not correct. Part of the problem is that characters such as 求, this one, is not really used in modern Chinese, so people may interpret it incorrectly. The following paragraph, another 16 characters. 参差 means uneven, long and short. 荇菜 is a kind of water plant. It's like this. People can eat it. 左右 means left and right. 流 here means to pick. This is really an ancient meaning. and rarely used nowadays, as now this character Liu means to flow. 知 means it, which refers to the 姓蔡 previously. So on the river, this virtuous man is picking this water plant, 姓蔡, from left and right. Now we can guess this natural seeing may lead to another subject that's really intended. It is 窈窕淑女，寤寐求之. We know 窈窕淑女, this graceful girl. And 寤寐means when awake and when asleep. 寤 is awake and 寐is asleep. 求 is to seek. 知 means it, here referring to the girl. So this virtuous man is thinking about seeking her no matter awake or asleep. Now the next paragraph, 求之不得. We know what is 求之 from the previous line. 不得 is not getting it. So this man, despite him seeking her, didn't manage to get her. So he 寤寐思服. 寤寐is the same as the last paragraph, when awake and asleep. 思 is to think, to miss. And 服 here also means to think, to miss. Again, this is a very ancient use. We now don't have this meaning in modern Chinese. So he can't get to the girl and he keeps thinking about her. 悠哉悠哉. Yu means long. What is long? Could be his missing thoughts, could be the time he spent missing her. 哉 has no meaning, just an interjection, so can be vaguely understood as ah or oh. This line could be interpreted as oh, so long, so long. And then what? 辗转反侧. 辗转 means to turn left and turn right. And 反侧 is the same, to turn over and to turn sideways. So basically, 辗转反侧 means turning this way and that way, cannot stay restful. So our protagonist, this virtuous man, this 君子, was in love with this 窈窕淑女, this graceful girl, but he couldn't win her heart yet. What is he going to do? The last two paragraphs are largely a repeat of the second paragraph, only changing a very few words. Let's see. 参差荇菜，左右采之. And the next paragraph is 参差荇左右芼之. Okay, so the only difference is 采 and the 芼. Both 采 and 芼 means the same as the liu previously. They mean to pick this 荇菜 water plant. And then both have 窈窕淑女. And we have 琴瑟友之 and 钟鼓乐之. This 琴瑟 and 钟鼓, they are all Chinese musical instruments. 琴 and the 瑟 are zither-like instruments, like this. So this is 琴, this is 瑟. And the 钟鼓are bells and drums, percussion instruments. These bells are called 编钟. Okay, we call it 编钟 in China. And they are pitched at a wide range, so can play very sophisticated music. 友 means to befriend, and the 乐 means to make happy. So this virtuous man thought of various ways he played the 琴瑟 and the 钟鼓 to befriend the girl, to try to make her happy. Now you can appreciate why such poems tend to be sung by people. You could even imagine people may start by reading it. And then when they get to the choral bit, the part gets repeated over and over again, like the last two paragraphs, especially here. Music instruments could join in the most natural way, and the atmosphere would be fantastic. It is a pity that we don't know what these poems should sound like. Must be so fascinating. Hope you like this ancient poem, and it would really be fabulous if you could all memorize the first 16 characters. 关关雎鸠，在河之洲。窈窕淑女，君子好逑. I'm sure you will feel very special and proud once you've done it. That's all. Thank you.